good friends.
Well, tell me who they were.
Well,
How'd you meet?
there was, we just grew up together in Norman Park. And we were bonded by camaraderie.
Uh-huh.
You know what camaraderie
I don't
is?
think.
Is it, some people call it camaraderie. Is it camaraderie or camaraderie? Camaraderie. We had a lot of that in Norman Park with the Dirty Dozen. We were all sweet kids. Just stayed in the devil men all the time. Mamas and daddies. It's a good thing that we didn't have a telephone. A lot of the mamas and daddies didn't have telephones in those times. I don't think I had a... Well, we did. We finally got a telephone. We got a telephone out when we lived on the farm, I know. Because that's the time that Daddy, Holt, and Gene, and I went along, but I was just a little fella. And that's when we dynamited all of the telephone poles off of our property because Daddy gave them easement to go across the property with the understanding that there would be a telephone put in and at least a 10 to 12 year usage of a telephone because of the right-of-way easement that was granted them. So Daddy kept asking them for a telephone. They wouldn't come. So he told Holt and Gene to go get the dynamite. And they augured into the bottom of those telephone poles. And I'll tell you what, they came out the next day and replaced the poles and put us a telephone in our house because the telephone line was on the ground. Now that's the kind of grandpa you had.
I know.
He would argue with a stop sign. If he was right, you'd always win. Well, let's get back to the Dirty Dozen. There was myself, Clifton and Clennon Foreman, who was the brothers of one of my sweethearts I'll tell you about later. There was Harrell Griffin, Jimmy Howard, Stuart Newton, Tom Burnett, Jimmy Davis, and Carter. And I forget that. We just called him Carter. I forget that kid's name.
It's in there.
Just Carter. Anyway, we had a little deal going where we had a lot of fun together. Played sports together in school. However, one year I wanted to be a cheerleader. Can you imagine? I was a good one. But I had broken my collarbone playing basketball. And it just hurt and hurt and hurt, and I just didn't want to do that, so I was out there riding for a while in basketball games. Anyway, Dirty Dozen, we did things together. Clifton and Clennon's dad had a service station and an automobile garage there in downtown Norman Park. Norman Park was much larger. It had a lot more people in it than now. Clifton Clennon's dad gave him a burned out Model A Ford. It had been gutted, but he had it parked on the back side of the lot where they lived. And we decided, Clifton and Clinton wanted to know if we could all pitch in, we'd fix that thing up. And we did. We fixed the dash on it, we replaced the dash the best we could. Replaced the windows, the doors. The rumble seat had been burned out. So we took the rumble seat out and we built us a wooden body. And we nailed it down, or, bolted it down onto the frame. And it went right up under where, that was what they call the old cooter hull. Cooter shell. You've heard that term. Anyway, we started working on this Model A Ford. 1926. Model A Ford. And Clifton and Clinton, they started driving that thing even on the road. We all drove it illegally. And we would go off in the dirt roads around Cockle County, around the Norman Park area. And we'd go hunting in it. We'd go to Moultrie in it. We'd go to Tipton in it. And we had transportation all the time. Of course, gasoline in those days, you could buy gasoline for 17 cents a gallon. Can you believe that?
Mm-hmm.
We had that much reserve fuel. Of course, you got to remember that we had already been in war. What's that? And we still had that much fuel left to have to pay 17 cents a gallon. But the Dirty Dozen had a lot of camaraderie. One of the most famous of events occurred when, in 1947, somewhere along in there, Norman College was a football power, because most all of the people going to Norman College was vets.
Mm.
We had veterans from all over the South that went to Norman College, Junior College.
And that's where my daddy,
That's right.
Okay.
That's how your daddy got to be,
my mama.
at Norman Junior College.
Mm.
And your uncle was also there. Did
Which
you-
one?
The one that was up in North Carolina at one.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
What was his name?
Keep going, I'll think of it.
Anyway,
Kelly says.
that's how that's how the college, the dorms, every spare room in the town had a Norman College student in it.
Mm.
I mean, houses, you couldn't find a house. You couldn't find a place to live.
Is that when Granny had that little boarding house?
Yeah, that's the reason Dad built that boarding house in 19...
house. Yeah.
Well, we started building that thing in 45, and we moved into it in 46,
Okay.
and that's the reason he did that. We had students from all over living in that house. I remember one of the boarders that we had, beautiful lady, Evelyn Taylor. She was beautiful, and I had a crush on her. But the event was that after a big football dinner, everybody was sitting around talking and carrying on, and Mrs. Register, who owned the cafe, ran everybody out and went home, and somehow or another she had left something on, and the restaurant burned.
Mm.
Just gutted it. Well, of course the cooler was in the back of the building, and they had several cases of eggs that had gone through that heat, and they had them set. They had them set on the sidewalk, and Clifton and Clinton and Harry Clark. Harry Clark was another one of the dirty dozen. And we took those cases of eggs, and we figured, well, we'd just have an egg fight. And then one of us said, well, why are we wasting our eggs? Let's save these eggs to get somebody else. Let's not throw them at each other. So we took about 3 or 4 cases of those eggs, and we hid them in the foundation area. There was a little door that went under the Methodist church. So nobody would ever go in there. So we hid those eggs under the Methodist church. And this old boy that used to come through Norman Park going to Mochi, he lived up around Omega Tipton somewhere. But he had a yellow convertible, and he was so proud of it. We made it yellower than it was. Because every time he'd come down the 319 highway going to Mochi to see his girlfriend or anything, we'd plaster that dude. Just about every night he'd get plastered. And of course he didn't stick around long, but when he came by there was about 8 or 9 eggs hit him. He'd have to pull in to our service station up there and get it washed off. It was, we just...
You bad.
We was bad.
Tell about the bag on the porch.
My neighbor there in that house that we built, that we lived in, his name was Arnold Horn, and he was vice president of one of the banks in Moultrie, and he had a daughter by the name of Ann, who is now married to a physician that is retired, and they live in the Americas.
Mm-hmm.
But Arnold Horn had a steel picket fence around his property. And we were on the corner there where Joe and Irma used to live. And then our house was here, Joe and Irma's house was here, and then Arnold Horn's house was here. And so Arnold was always snooty. Just give us hell all the time. Well, me and Harry and Clifton and Clinton, and I think Stuart and I know Tom Burnett was with us. We were out causing havoc and dissension amongst the populace in Norman Park one night, which we did quite often. And so one of us thought about how we could do something to Arnold to make him mad, real mad. So we all defecated in paper sacks and tied them together, set them afire, and Clifton and Harry Clark, no, Clinton, it was Clinton and Harry Clark, was elected to go through the picket fence, or the gate, to the porch and light those bags of doo-doo and come running. And they did.
Ring the doorbell.
Well, yeah, they had to ring the doorbell. That was another thing about it. And so Clinton, no, it was Clinton and Harry Clark was elected to go to the porch. They rang the doorbell and started running, And about the time they got to that gate, I slammed it shut. I slammed it shut. Well, they piled up on that gate, almost knocked the fence down, the whole thing. But they got up and we took off, and we went down just far enough to where we could see what Arnold was doing with those fires. And he was out there on the front porch putting out them fires, just stomping. That doo-doo was flying. Doo-doo was flying everywhere. And we heard about that for at least 8 or 9 years.
I bet you did.
Ann was his daughter's name, and she got the word that the Dirty Dozen had done the deed. But none of us ever fessed up to it. But we had a lot of interrogation from my parents about that.
I bet.
Especially me, because Daisy, Arnold's wife, Daisy Shepherd was her maiden name. She was married to that lady at Briar Lake that was our supper person. Here's Shepherd's wife. Mom! What was that lady's name at Briar Lake that was a shepherd? Harry's sister. Joe. Joe Shepherd.
No, Joe was Harry's wife.
Yeah. But Harry's sister was Daisy, who was married to Arnold Horn. And he was the guy that we doo-dooed on the porch. I was just trying to put things together. Because Daisy Horn was Harry Shepherd's sister. And Harry...
Harry Shepherd had a sister at that Norman Parkwood Union thing.
Mom, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah.
So she was friends with your mom?
She grilled Mom a lot about that. Well, where were they? Who was with him? Well, what are you going to do about reprimanding him for what he done? Daisy, how do you know he done it? She pleaded with her. Well, I don't think Mom, if we, any of us kids would have done anything like that.
She'd have blistered your
Yeah, yeah. It'd be like the time that I shot this Evans girl on the tit with a spitball. And she grabbed her breast and looked over there. Sonny! I said, yeah? What'd you do that for? That hurt. Well, Margaret Melton, who is the sister of James Melton, the well-known, world-renowned soprano. Anyway, she caught me. She made me admit that I was the one that shot the Evans girl on, and I forget that, I believe her name was Linda Evans, on the boob. So, that's another joke. Anyway, she took me down to see Forrest Bessinger, who was our principal. And he said, well, what am I going to do with you? I said, let me go home. He said, no, you ain't going to do these kind of things and get away with it. I'm going to whip you. And so I says, okay. Well, he went to pull his belt out of his pants, and I all of a sudden bolted on him. I says, I don't think, Forrest, I says, Mr. Bessinger, you might as well put that belt back in your pants because you ain't going to whip me. And man, I seen him turn red. And he could have bit my head off. Well, he says, it was already after school. He said, I'm going to take you home to your mama. And I said, okay. So we got in his car and we rode over to the house. And he told Mother what had happened. She started squalling. Why in the world you do that, son? You behave yourself. I said, okay, Mom. I'll go back up there and let him help me. So we went back up to his office. He pulls his belt out again. And again, I decided that he wasn't going to help me. He said, well, I'll tell you what. He says, when should Daddy get home? I said, well, I don't know. Sometimes he comes home early. Because at that time, he was running the sawmill regularly. And we sat over there, and it was, I know it had to be almost dark when Daddy showed up. But Daddy showed up eventually. And Forrest told him what I'd done. And Daddy looked at Forrest and says, well, why don't you take him back up there to the office and whip his butt? He says, okay, I'll do that. So I went back up there and I got my butt whipped because I knew if my daddy got a hold of me, it'd be hell to pay. So I let Forrest Messenger whoop me.
You need to check it.
He wants to check. Hang on.